Judges is probably one of the most interesting books in the Bible. If you ever want to say, I can't believe that this is actually written, it's in the Bible, you can go, you can read it. Read the last 4 chapters of Judges. I think every single person in here would be unbelievably surprised of what's actually written in there. We're talking about concubines. We're talking about a whole city wanting to drag out another man and violate him. We're talking about them doing that to a female. We're talking about that female ultimately being killed. We're talking about that master then cutting up that concubine that's dead and delivering all 12 pieces to the 12 tribes of Israel. I mean, we're talking about some unbelievable stuff. They're like, why is this even in there? What does this have to do? That's at the end of Judges. We're going into Judges. So you got, last week you talked about who? Who'd you talk about last week? Joshua? Right, so Joshua, they're in the land of Canaan. What were some of the things that God told the Israelites to not do? Not to take anything? Is that what he told them? Did he tell them not to take anything? What are some things?
They kept whining because they were tired and hungry.
That was before they got there. That was before. That was as they were wandering in the wilderness. They went into the land of Canaan. They took over the land of Canaan. What did God tell them not to do? What are some things he told them? He told them some truths in Joshua. Does anyone remember? No one remembers anything from last week at all. What God had told them. It's pivotal to this whole story, to the Judges. No one remembers. Now what? Do you remember that God said, do not marry these, do not go to the land of Canaan, keep any of them alive. Don't marry. Don't go. Because if you do, they're going to lead you astray. Don't do it. Don't do this. That's kind of hard for us to understand. It's not the level of what we're going to be talking about today. But why did God issue that command? Because it sounds like, boy, that's not a very loving God, but there's actually tremendous love in there, even by making that statement. Do you remember that he said, hey, I'll be with you. You stay faithful to me. Recognize who I am. I will remain faithful to the promise that I gave you. You remember that? All you got to do is just remember me. That's the very first commandment. I'm the God who delivered you out of Egypt. Don't forget what I did. Remember me. Remember what I did. You forget about me, there's going to be trouble. So he's giving them a warning. It's not a threat. It's just a natural fact. He'd say the same thing to all of us. You forget who I am, and you don't go. I'm just telling you. It's not a threat. I just know what's going to happen because I know Satan's going to do this. I know 100%, I know Satan, he's going to do this. He's going to lead you astray, and bad things are going to happen. Really bad things are going to happen to you. And then we all turn around and go, boy, I haven't given God a moment's notice for 30 years of my life, and things have gone not very good for me. How dare God do that? I gave him no attention for 30 years of my life. Didn't even pay attention. And now I'm going to blame him for that. Even though he'd warn all of us right now. You turn away from me and you don't give me any time. You don't give me any of your time. And then you're going to get mad at me that all of a sudden things go bad. I'm just telling you this is what's going to happen. This isn't a threat. He's just saying this is what's going to happen. It's just, he's speaking truth. Anything else that he said? Listen to him. Listen to him. So let's go to Judges. Okay? So we're going to flip over. You're going to look at Judges 2, second chapter. We're going to go look at verses 6 through 8. All right? Can someone read Judges 2, 6 to 8? I know it's on the screen. You can either look in the Bible or look on the screen. Someone read that for me. Nice and loud. Someone that can talk loud. Anybody? Go ahead.
When Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of
Okay? So, look at verse 7. What does verse 7 say? Look at verse 7. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. So up to this point, all of those, what are some of the great works that they would have seen? When they say the great works, you've gone through here at Ignite. What are some of the great works? Name one. What are some great things that the people of Israel saw? You had your hand up, right? Jordan River party. Parting of the Jordan. Okay? It was a terrible marker. Like someone ate the end of it. Throw that one away. Better. Anybody else?
When they said they were thirsty, having him provide them water and food.
They provided water. Just by tapping it. Water was bitter. Moses just throws a log into the water and all of a sudden it turns sweet like honey. Really? I just threw a piece of wood in there. That's all he did? So if I did that, all of a sudden you think it would taste any different if I threw a piece of wood into some water? It would taste better? No. Anybody else? There's a bunch more. What else happened? What else happened in the wilderness? All those people, what'd they see? What unbelievable miracles did they see? What else? What'd they eat every day? What'd they eat while they're in manna? Just wake up and there's just this stuff on the ground that you just had to pull up. Like frosted flakes. Anybody else?
When they marched around the city for 7 days and then
Jericho? Yeah. All we did was march around. Imagine getting that order. Just march around the city. As we're walking around with pitchforks and everything, we don't even have very good armor, and we're just walking around the thing, and that's all you want me to do. Go around 7 times, and the wall falls down. Really? Yeah. Anybody else? All right, so we only got 4 things. All right. There's a lot of other things, right? They got manna. They defeated 5 kings. 5 kings that were the greatest 5 kings in that region, and they just walk in right before they go into, right as they cross the Jordan, and they take care of 5 kings that are mounted up against them, outnumbered 10-1, and the Israelites take care of the 5 kings. And by the way, you say, "Oh, that didn't happen." Oh yeah, check archaeology. Sure that didn't happen. Okay, we have archaeological proof that that battle happened. Know for a fact it did. Explain that. All right, so now we're going to go to the next one. So here we go. And this is where it gets a little unbelievable. All right? Who can read Judges 2:10? Go ahead, read it.
And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And then arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work he had done for Israel.
So there we go. There's the rub. So a whole generation comes along, and what's the problem here? What's the problem that you see here? What's their problem?
they don't know what the Lord did for the Israelites.
How could that happen? How could that happen?
They're kind of just ungrateful.
Ungrateful, but they didn't even know. It says they didn't even know. After them, who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. They didn't know. How did they not know? How did this generation not know? What do you think?
The generation before them didn't tell them.
Oh, the generation before them, even though they knew it, they didn't pass it on to their kids. They didn't pass it on. Who failed here? Who failed? I'm going to be blunt and I'm going to be very honest with many people in this room that maybe don't want to go, don't want to hear it. Because I know there's several that do not want to hear what I'm saying. I've done this enough. There's some that close their mind. They don't listen. They don't pay attention to this. This is something that they don't really want to do. They just come here because my parents are making me come, so I really don't want to hear this. Your generation, what percentage of generation in yours are atheists or agnostic? Atheists, I don't believe in God. There's no God. Agnostic, I don't know if there is, but I don't really believe one, but there might be. What percentage of your age group that's right in this room would you say are agnostic or atheists? What'd you say? What'd you guess? Percentage now. Let's put it this way. When I was a kid, it was 8%. What would you say it is now?
Maybe like 12.
12%. So we got 12% on the table. Is it 12%? 25%. It's higher than 25? Between 12, 25, what would you say? Who says it's higher than 25? Who says it's lower than 25? %. Why is there 30%? Because there's a whole generation that is not telling their children about the good news of Jesus Christ. They're not passing it on to their kids. And it's why we find ourselves in the situation we find ourselves in the United States of America. That's why. And why are you here? Because there's multiple leaders right now praying for every single person of their small group. They're praying with Miss Christine. And they're spending their time on a Sunday so that you know Jesus Christ. And you know it. They're spending of their time. They're giving of their time so that you know. So you don't end up like this generation. You're going to find out what's going to happen to this generation. Because they didn't know, you're going to find out what happens. And you say, what does this have to do with me? What does Judges, an Old Testament story, have to do with me in 2023 Menominee Falls? Right there. If I don't know, the same thing's going to happen to me. I've lived enough, and I know that when I strayed far enough, bad things started to happen, and it wasn't God's fault, it was my own. Doesn't mean bad things don't happen to me as a believer. It's not saying that. But that's what this is. So a whole generation grew up, and you guys all have a bunch of leaders that spend up their time on a Sunday. Do you really think if given a choice, they wouldn't be like, I'd rather just be at home watching a Sunday night football game or not have to come here on a Sunday? I think they would. I'd be honest with you, if I didn't have to come do this, I'd rather be at home right now, getting the meal ready, and not have to do this. Mr. Matt probably would be the same way. Mr. Matt went to school because I want kids to know what I know and to feel what I do. That's why they're here. This generation in Judges didn't do that. So they knew who God was, but they didn't pass the story on to their kids. Okay, who's going to read this next one? Judges 11-16. Now here we go. Because they didn't tell them, and nobody told them, can someone read this one? It's a little longer verse. You're probably not going to be able to read it on the screen. You go 11-16. Go ahead, Millie.
And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served God. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went after other gods, among the gods of the people who were around them, and bowed down to them. And it provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them. And he sold them into the hand of the surrounding enemies, so that they would no longer withstand their enemies. Wherever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them, as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were in sore distress.
All right. So, now, what are some things in there that happened to the Israelites? Because they didn't. Because the whole generation grew up that didn't know the Lord, what are some things that happened to them?
They served false gods.
They served false gods. What else? All you have to do is look at those verses 11-15. What else happened to them? They served false gods. What else? Look in the Bible. It's easy. All you got to do is look in the Bible and read one off. Go ahead. They did evil. have to do is look at history and look at non-Israelite history, and all you got to do is you pick one. Pick one of the ancient civilizations that we have different stuff. You can read about the evil that they were doing. Anybody else? There's a lot more here.
They were in terrible distress.
Why were they in distress? Guys, catch? Why were they in distress? Why did they feel distressed? They were just doing what other people in that region were doing. Why feel distressed? Why?
They're not getting God's grace.
Yeah. But if they're acting like all the other people, why would they be in distress? They're just doing what everybody else does, so what's going on here? You catch that? Why are they in distress? Who cares? I just act like all the other ones. Do you think that maybe the people that were really there, even though they turned them aside, do you think that the Amalekites, do you think the Philistines, do you think they wanted the Israelites there? Even though they started to act just like the Philistines and they worshiped the same gods, do you think the Philistines actually wanted them there? Xavier, watch out. Anybody? Why? Think the Philistines wanted them there? No. So that's why they're in distress. Anything else? What else? Just read it. Read a verse. What else do you see that happened to them? There's a lot more in there. The anger of the Lord was kindled against them. He gave them over to plunderers. They took their stuff. They plundered them. Do you think they just came and took their stuff, or do you think they killed some of them? Think maybe they were with your wife and they'd take your wife and your daughters? Think that happened? Oh, yeah. Why? I'm just acting just like the other Philistines. Why don't they like me? Why do they have this problem with me? What else?
They probably don't like him because they probably believe him.
Yeah, correct. What else there? And he sold them into the hand of the surrounding enemies, so there's slavery now. They're back in slavery. They no longer could withstand their enemies. They couldn't win. They couldn't win a battle. Even if they decided to go and fight against us, they couldn't win. God wasn't with them. So they couldn't win. God gave them over. You say, whoa, God doesn't do that now? God doesn't do that now. Right? It's not in this Bible study, but in Romans. Romans chapter 2. You say, well, this doesn't have anything to do with me. Anything. Go look at Romans chapter 2. Sorry, Romans 1. Romans 1. I'm going to just skip around here a little bit, but Romans 1 starting at 24. Starting at 22. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men and birds and animals and creeping things. Verse 24. Romans 1, 24. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature, rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. There's a giving up. Your heart has to match God's heart. What does God want? I have to do this. If not, your heart, what your heart desires, God will turn you over to it. And he'll say, that's what he did here. He just did this here to the judges. He just did this to the Israelites. You don't love me, you don't acknowledge me. I love you so passionately, so much, I want to do this. But your heart has to match mine, and it's not. You don't even acknowledge me. So fine. A loving God would say, fine. Go ahead. Go ahead. That doesn't mean God doesn't keep searching, but he'll turn you over to him. And then you go 30 years of your life not acknowledging God, and you wonder why this is all happening. And then, why? Because I haven't really acknowledged who God is. Because faith comes through hearing. So if I'm in here, and I don't pay attention, I don't listen, then I'm just like one of these Israelites. I'm not even paying attention. I'm not even hearing. I'm not even giving God my time. So God's going, fine, you don't want to give me your time? Fine, I'll turn you over. Doesn't mean God's going to stop not searching out, but it's going to be difficult because faith comes through hearing. And if I'm not going to listen with Mr. Eggles talking, then how am I going to actually have faith? Because the only way is the Holy Spirit. I don't generate faith, the Holy Spirit does. This is God's word. If I don't listen to God's word, go. There's some kids in here that are in the 6th grade class that teach religion. Same thing. If you're not going to listen, you've heard me say this multiple times already. I've been teaching a class for like 2 weeks. Faith comes from hearing. Period. It's not anything I do. So this is it. So they turned away. They literally turned away. So now you say, how could they do this? How could they do this? We're going to play a little game. We got to stay under control here because it's going to get a little louder. I'm going to show the next screen. It's going to be a thing of about 12 items. I'm going to show it for 10 seconds. You have to try it. So look at the things, and then when we're done after 10, then you got to try and write down how many of the items you saw. It's an individual game. Because you say, how could the Israelites do this? It won't happen to me. This won't happen to me. I know who God is. There's every adult in this room knows that life gets surrounded by you. You get going there, and pretty soon you're like, boy, I haven't been giving God hardly any of my time for the last several months. Literally zero. Prayer life goes in the toilet. I don't maybe go to church. I may have not reading the Bible. And all of a sudden you're like, why is all this stuff? I can't handle certain things that normally don't. How do I know this? Because every adult in this room knows that this happens. Multiple times. We're prone to it. So how did this happen to the Israelites? Because it happens to us. How quickly we forget. Our mind is limited. So here we go. Ready to go? Let me get a timer up here because I can't go too much longer. Because I would say lead up there long enough. But you're not going to have a long time. Here we go. That's it. How many did you guys get? Who got more than 4? How many were there total? Does anybody know the exact number that there was up there? 25. 25 items. Was there 25 up there? I didn't count them. It seems a little high to me. I think. 16? I didn't count them. I wasn't looking, so I don't even know the items, to be quite honest with you. All right, now, in your tables now. You got this? So now work together as a group. Because this is the key. Now you got to work together as a group, as your table. All right? Here we go. Go. Work as a team. All right. What were some of the items? How many think they got all 20? How many were there now? 24. So 25 was spot on. We thought 16. Without looking at it on the grid, when I got it from Mr. Matt, I would have guessed there was 12. Way off. Didn't even look at that. 24. I would have been off myself. I didn't believe you when you said 25, but brave for you, man. You stood up. You got it right almost. All right, guys. All right. We got to get back. So what does this have to do? Guys, what does this have to do? What does it have to do? It's the fact that how quickly we forget. And it's easier working with another person. It's easier working with a group to tackle it. These Israelites should have remembered. Remembered what God did and then tackle it. So what is an idol? They worship idols. What's an idol? Say, well, I'm not an idol. Now keep in mind, I want to point something out to you that popped out to me when I was doing this. I missed it. Go back. I'm going to go back 2 slides. You know, this is right here. And the people were around them and bowed down to them. If you bow down to something, what does that ultimately mean? And this might be a little bit heavy for your grade level. What do you think bowing down, what does that really show? Bowing down to something. If I bow down to something, what does that really show? Ooh, trust, that's real close. Heart. Yes, that's where my heart is. I've said this before, you could say that there's all sorts of evolution and everything, but then someone explained to me why there's a natural drive, there's a heart, there's a will, there's an inner person, there's a spiritual being that I have, because I have a heart, I have a will, I have determination, where did I get that? That is not something that can be quantitatively talked about in the sense of material things. It's a spiritual thing. Why? We all have it. We all have drives. We all have certain things that pull us. Every adult does. Every kid does. Everything. Why do some drive for basketball and some drive for hockey and swimming and all sorts of things? Some are academically driven and they don't know. And it's an internally drive. Some are inherently messy. Some are inherently clean. Why? Heart. You had your hand up. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Now you're drinking. What are you going to say?
I said, because they admire them.
Yeah, admired. They put all their heart. Trusted it, admired it, loved it. All right? This is what Tim Keller says. This man, unbelievable writer of Christian things, an unbelievably deep theological mind. He got pancreatic cancer. And he just died this last year. And he suffered. And they said, well, this is going to be terrible for you. He's a young man, too. He's only like early 60s. Well, he's not that old. And this is what he said. What is an idol? It is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. What are some things then by that definition would you say is an idol then? Because say, well, I'm not kneeling down to a Baal, which is Baal, which is just like a bull. I'm not worshiping down to an Ashereth pole that's just this carved image like a totem pole. I'm not doing that. So I'm good. He said, I don't sit down to idols. Well, now I see that definition. What are potentially some idols?
Any sort of sports or anything you do that comes before God.
How many in here play sports on a Sunday? And aren't those things early in the morning? And a whole generation grew up that didn't know the Lord. I wonder where that happens. Wow. A whole generation grew up and didn't know the Lord. I don't know how that could happen. That won't happen to me. But yet, how any adult in this room, were there sports around on a Sunday when you were around? Drew? Mr. Sapinski? Did they have all this stuff on Sundays like they did? Okay, what else? Sports. What's something else that can be an idol?
Social media. Your phone.
Phone. That thing's while this is a massive blessing, I did not have this. This would have gotten me in massive trouble when I was your age. Massive trouble. I'm glad it wasn't around, to be quite honest with you. But I also know how dangerous it can be in my son's hand and my kids' hands. While it's a blessing, it's also an unbelievable thing. It can get you in massive trouble. It's a massive distraction. I'm looking at that thing more than talking with other people and paying attention to what's around me. Meanwhile, that's what I'm supposed to be. Yeah? How do I know the glories of what God has done when I'm just looking at this? I don't know. Anybody else? Phone? Social media? What's another? Come on, we could go on here. Come on now. Pick one. Gossip. You like to hear gossip? Yep. Anything else? Being a celebrity. Fame. Absolutely. Fame.
Other people.
Other people could be. Sure.
Money.
Money. Of course. That's what. You know, probably the number one. And that's a pull for all of us, especially with the rising prices of everything. Right? One of the things here, and it says here, if you are blending into culture so much and other people can't see your light, you're squashing the Holy Spirit that lives inside of you. Because here's the thing, if Christ is in me, and I say this all the time, if Christ is in me, and it says it over and over again in the Bible, this isn't a one-time off, I don't know if that's what he means. Paul says it 112 times in everything he writes, 112, I think it's a clear point. If Christ is inside of me, isn't it a problem then that I'm engaging in it? How do I rectify this? Now, I'm a sinner, I'm not saying you're going to be perfect, because I'm not, and neither are you ever going to be, but to not go. So if I'm not even given it a thing. So we have a power source. Keep in mind, we have a power source inside of us way greater than the Israelites ever did. And they fell off. And now I've got a power source that I can turn around and say, I know I fell off, so I might want to pay attention. I might want to pay attention. So what was the role of a judge? I don't know if there's the next one. Look at verse 16. What does it say? What's it say? What does that say? What does verse 16 say? What did they do? Then the Lord raised up judges. Look at the significance of this. God says, you stay faithful to this promise, I'll stay faithful. The Israelites don't stay faithful. They don't even acknowledge who God is. We just went back 2 verses ago. Let me back up, sorry. Look at this. We'll just go back a couple more. Look at this one. Look at all the stuff they did. They did all of this. Did not do what God said to do. He said, if you remain faithful, I'll remain faithful. They don't remain faithful. And what does God still do? What did he do? God raised up judges. He brought up, I'll deliver these people. They cried out to him, Lord, help us. Don't we do that? Hey, don't acknowledge God, then something happens in our life. And then all of a sudden we go, God, can you help me here? Can you help me? Like he's a genie in a bottle. Then we can just pull him out whenever we want. You know what? I'll encapsulate you. I'll just put you in this little thing here. And I'll open you up, God, when I need you. And I won't give you any time. And then I open it up and say, God, help me. I find myself in a situation. Can you help me, God? Please help me. Help me. And then he helps. And then you turn around and go, no, close it up. You do it again. And you do it over and over and over again. So God delivers them. He delivers up a judge. He helps them out. Didn't have to. This shows God's love for his people, even though they turned aside. They didn't remain faithful, but God remained faithful to his promise to Abraham. I'm going to make you a great nation. So he raised up a judge. Now let me ask you this. How do you think it went? They raised up a judge. What do they think the Israelites did? When I flip this thing, don't look at it. What do you think happened in verse 17? What do you think they did? Think the Israelites listened? Or do you think they didn't? Who says they think? Yeah, I think they probably turned around. Who thinks they didn't? Yet they would not listen to their judges, but look at that, that's a strong word, but prostituted themselves, sold themselves to other gods and worshiped them. They doubled down. They didn't just bow down to them. Now they start prostituting themselves and sold themselves to them. They quickly turned from the ways of their ancestors who had been obedient to the Lord's commands. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for them, he was with the judge and saved them out of the hands of their enemies, as long as the judge lived. For the Lord relented because of their groaning under those who oppressed and afflicted them. But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worshiping them. They refused to give up with their evil practices and stubborn ways. It's a sad story. So the people were in this constant turn. So now, what are some things in there that the people didn't do? What are some things that happened? God raised up a judge. He remains faithful to his promise. And now what did they do? What was their response?
They would broke and then turn aside from their promise.
Turn aside again? Yep. What else did they do? It's all up there. What else did they all do?
Prostitute themselves to other gods.
Other gods, again. And they doubled down on the activity. Notice that. One was just bowing. Now they're prostituting themselves. Now they're selling themselves to it. Now they're just making it worse. Anything else? What else do you see? Anything else? You could list a lot more up there. Anybody else? They were even more corrupt. If we'd list everything, we would list everything on here. This whole sheet would be this whole one side. So the question is, we've got this side over here, all this stuff, and this is like a dividing line right here on this board. What was this dividing line between all of these things and all of these? What was this? Promise, yes. What else? Luke? Whole generation. And they didn't know God. Didn't know Him. Didn't give the time of day. Watered down the words. Changed what it really meant. Took the 10 Commandments and just ignored them. Didn't understand what it was. This was the dividing line. They turned aside. And as I said before, the leaders came up. And that's why. That's why there's leaders in here. We've had enough here. This is not knowing God. Look at the two sides. And it should be way more lopsided than this. There should be about, we could have listed 20 things over here. And there should have been maybe at max, maybe 7 or 8 over here. It should be way more lopsided than it is. But we didn't write them all down. Plus my handwriting's not the greatest, so. But that's the thing, so you got this, all right? That's the dividing line. And like I said, 30% of your guys' age group in this room are either atheist or agnostic. And why are they atheist and agnostic? Because the generation before didn't tell you. And now you have adults, you come in here, people are spending of their time, so that doesn't, you have a chance to hear it. But you have to hear. No leader in here can force you. No leader in here can make the ultimate difference. It's only the Holy Spirit. All I can do is be here for you and talk to you and share with you. That's the only way. It's the only way it can be done. So now, there's going to be a question that you're going to be asked. And I'll ask the leaders this, and we won't spend the time here because it's 8:20. Somebody comes up and says, share me the gospel. What's the gospel? Have a reason. 1 Peter 3:15. Have a reason. When someone comes up to you and asks you, why do you feel this way? Why do you act differently than others? Be able to answer them. Be able to tell them for the reason, for the hope that is inside of them. Because that's ultimately what all of us are called to do. How do I give that reason? Do I give that reason? Or do I just say, well, Jesus. Jesus died for my sins. And I just leave it at that? Jesus died for my sins. Try and tell someone that doesn't believe in Jesus that someone died on the cross for their sins, who doesn't believe they're a sinner. I'm not a sinner. What do I care if Jesus died for me? I'm not a sinner. What do I do? So what's your answer? What's the good news? What's the gospel? If someone goes, you have to write down the gospel. Every single person in here, including myself, should have a written thing down. If somebody asks, I should be able to give that answer like that. And give it concisely, give it there, so that those words will have an impact on that person. Not just never think about it, never write it down, never contemplate it, and then you're an adult, and I bet you every adult in this room has been set somewhere, and someone comes up and asks, and how many times you said, I don't know, yeah, it's terrible. We should be able to give a reason. You guys should be able to give a reason. So that's one of the questions going to be asked. What's the reason? So small group leaders, spend some time on that, please. What would you say? It doesn't have to be concise. It doesn't have to be a paragraph. 2 sentences, 3 sentences. What would I say if someone asks? What would you say? What would any of us say? Last thing, go to Romans 10, because this is where it all comes down. Those are at Generate. Romans 10 is the big thing that the Baptists love to hammer home. But this is after that whole point. Romans 10, 14 through 15. Romans 10, 14 to 15. Here's the words. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? I don't believe in him. How are they going to call on him? How does someone know about Jesus? They don't even know. They don't even know who Jesus is. And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? Someone doesn't know about Jesus. How are they ever going to know Jesus if they've never even heard of him? They've never even heard. How are they going to do this? And how are they to hear? Notice it's about hearing without someone preaching. If we don't preach, how are they going to hear? And if not us, then who? If it's not people in this room, if it's not myself, if we don't do it, then who's going to do it? If I know Jesus and I'm not going to share it, and I'm not going to tell anybody, how are they ever going to know? Because if they don't know, they're going to be doing a lot of things over here. And now you tell me that the world doesn't do these things. You tell me the world does not do these things right now, and convince me that you don't see this stuff in the world right now. Kennedy Middle School. What in the world is going on there? What is going on in our schools? I didn't have to worry like you guys all have to worry about. That never happened when I was a kid. I mean, literally like never happened. Now it's a regular occurrence, a couple times a year, maybe more. Look what's going on in Maine. Yeah, that doesn't happen. Really? Okay. And how are they to preach unless they are sent? Did Jesus not send us? Go therefore, make disciples. As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. Good news is the gospel. We can go serve people all day to Tuesday. You can go everywhere, and I can serve, and I can work. And I can feed them. And as Pastor Howard said in a sermon about 3 months ago, I'll feed them, I'll go right to a food shelter, won't actually tell them the good news, but I'll stand there and I'll give them food. And it's literally as if you're just feeding them food and you're walking them straight to the gates of hell. And saying, here, good luck, good luck. But if I never tell them, how are they ever going to know? Romans 10, 14 to 15. We're sent. So like for instance here, I don't know your name, young man. This is what I mean. See, I've said this in 6th grade. I've said this before. If the answer is there and I'm laughing and con around going there, if faith comes from hearing, and I sit here and I don't hear, and I'm a distraction to everybody else, and they can't hear, how am I ever going to come to faith? How am I going to grow in my faith if when I have a chance to hear, I don't listen? I can't. So now I'm standing up here going, okay, now what do I do? Do I get really mad at you that I don't? Do I try and help? I actually will pray for you, young man, because you're not hearing. And see, then you double down and you think I'm clowning around and joking. And I'm not. Because this is life and death. To me, this is serious business. Real serious. So if I come in here and I do this and I clown around, and there's a couple on the older table over there, same thing. I've said it to them last year. But if I don't do this, I'm one of these guys. I'm watching you become one of these guys because I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. I've seen kids, friends of mine, that went to Lutheran schools, and they're now atheists. And I see how they live. I see their life. It's terrible. It's a terrible existence. And they're struggling, and they're mad, and they're frustrated. They're angry every day. They're mad. One guy turned around, and he became abusive to his wife and his kids. He wasn't that way when he was a believer, but he just turned this way. And now he's this type of person. I don't want to say his name, because this might be on somewhere. And I know if he ever watches, and I know he has watched some, he knows I'm talking about him. How did this happen? I turn away. I don't acknowledge who God is. I don't acknowledge it. And so I don't hear it. If faith comes from hearing, let's back up on Romans 10. This is all there. Those that go to Generate know this. Gotta find it here. The word is near is in your mouth and heart. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. That's right before. Faith comes from hearing. So they got to hear. Why does this relate to the judges' story? How does this relate to the judges' story? How does Romans 10, 14, 15, how does that relate to the judges? How does it relate? What's the two? What does the two have in common? And why didn't they know? Why didn't they believe it? They never heard it before. Why didn't they hear it before? Because the parents never told them? The whole generation before never told them. They never had a chance to hear it. Because it wasn't preached to them. They weren't told, they never heard, they didn't know. And look what happened. Same thing is alive. If they don't know, how are they ever going to hear it? Because it's not about what I do, it's not about what any of your leaders do. It's about just pointing people to what the Bible says, and then you react to what you hear. Does my heart match up with this? And it's not going to be perfect, by the way. That's the next difficult thing. Because now you got to be a Christian and tell people about Jesus, and then they're going to turn to you, well, yeah, you just gossiped about somebody too. Yeah? Yeah? I'm a sinner. And they can't shake it, so now what do I do? That's a whole other question. That's a whole other ignite thing. So spend some time on this, because this is huge. So what does the judges have to do? We are in the same cycle. The judges, you're going to see, do you guys have the sheet already? Do you guys give them sheets already? You're going to give them? You're going to find out. So what the judges do, it's a big circle, and we're in the same circle. Everything's good over here. Then all of a sudden you come up over here, you start to turn away. Then distress comes along, and you cry out and you lament to God. God delivers you, and then you're right back and you're right. And we're all in this. We're in the same circle. It happens to every single person in the room. It happens to me. It happens to me. I know that if I don't spend time, I know that this stuff, the world will press in. Because you sit there and you got Kennedy Middle School, and you got some guy that's there, and you got to deal with shooters. I don't know how you guys do it. To be honest with you, I don't know how you guys do it. It is very distressing to me that you got to go in, police officers go into some schools, and they tell you guys what to do, and you guys do drills for lockdown. That's very distressing to me. I can't imagine. Really? I got to really worry about this when I go to school. You guys should not have to worry about this. But now what do? How do I deal with this level? And then meanwhile, anxiety and depression is on an all-time high for youth, especially on the female side. Massive curve. It's not even remotely close to what it used to be. It's huge. How do I deal with that level of anxiety and that distress? I'm going to let God in and help me. I'm not saying it's just going to go away like that because, oh, there's God. No, but he can help. But if I don't turn to him, I'm just going to feel this way over and over and over again. And I know this from experience because I know someone very deeply that I love that had to find this out. And it doesn't go away. I don't know how you guys do it. I just don't know how you guys do it. It's very disturbing to me that police officers go into kindergartners, they got to play a little hide-and-seek game, and it's about a life-or-death situation. That, to me, is a sad state of affairs for this country. I don't know how you do it. And you don't just brush it off. I know when Mr. Matt said it, they kind of laughed. They kind of brushed it off. But come on now. Let's just face it up. Let's be real here. Let's get on the table. It's not something you should have to go through. It's not right. So now what do you do with those feelings that are inside? And that's why Mr. Matt said something. We all know what's there. As leaders, we all know you guys are feeling it. Talk about it. Get it out. Invite God in to help tackle those things. All right? Have fun, guys, with your small groups. Really focus on that gospel question. Is that good, Drew?